Hello, this is Talk TV, live from the Talk Radio studio. I'm Darryl Morris. Hope you're okay tonight. Thank you for your company. In the meantime, let's head to Australia. Rachel Brunsden is there for us. As ever, Rachel, nice to talk to you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, really, really well, thank you. Can we continue a conversation we've just been having at length about Taiwan and China, and the tensions that have raged this week, or that have intensified, shall we say, this week. Australia, of course, Rachel, play a really important part in this story, given the sort of geopolitical and physical location, I suppose. What has the response been to the last couple of days in Australia?
As you know, and as you said, we've got a new government, and our Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, kicked off in the first week by having to sort of dull down China tensions, and here she is again having to do the same. Our response has been actually really clever, I think. They haven't preemptively boxed themselves into a position, as our previous government just went hairy-chested bravado all over everything and left themselves sitting out in the breeze. We've been very careful to not preemptively box ourselves into any opinion either way, but also so that they can calibrate and really carefully select their words to facts as they happen. So it's a three-pronged approach. The first one is to not engage in any hypotheticals. The second one is to stand by our status quo of our one China policy. And the third is to not just simplistically say China good, China bad, US good, and we won't also engage in whether or not we will back the US in particular if military conflict arises. Essentially, we're going to have to, because they are an ally. But if things escalate in the Taiwan Strait, we're going to have to get involved. But I think there'll be more rhetoric about China's being a big bully, as there always has been, more than anything else. But it's a watch and wait, and Penny Wong's handling it beautifully. And the great thing is that it's a bipartisan support she has, so nobody's undercutting her and nobody's trying to step on her and everybody's just remaining really quiet and letting her do the talking.
And so where does that's significant, isn't it, Rachel, when it comes to a change? You know, that's a change in position for Australia. What has the response been? I mean, you might not know the answer to this question because it's quite specific, I suppose. It's happening in a different country. But what, as you understand it, has the response been in, say, America, who would perhaps like a more fulsome support from Australia, you would imagine?
Yeah, I think maybe the Pelosi visit was a little underthought and a little self-serving. There seems to be from what I'm reading, there seems to be a promise that was made back in late 70s that nobody would conduct any official business with Taiwan in an agreement with China. Newt Gingrich was the last person to go, but he belonged to the opposite political party that held the presidency. Pelosi's third in line to the presidency. So going there may have been a little underdone and not very well thought out. I think the US at the moment is sort of feeling itself in kind of all sorts of ways, and I'm, massive fan of Biden, I've got to confess. But with their response to Ukraine, etc., I think they're sort of feeling themselves, and I think they may have overstepped here just a little. They've got to remember that when they travel across the other side of the world and start, running around in their Milano Planix, we live there. So please tread carefully. Wear the lovely shoes, but tread carefully.
OK, Rachel, closer to home in Australia, the House of Representatives in your part of the world have passed the country's first climate change legislation in the last couple of days. What does it involve?
Oh, it's terrific. It's actually it's a very big bill, and a lot of it is yet to be fleshed out. We don't know. It's not yet passed the Senate, so we're waiting for that to happen in September when the Senate sits. But basically what it means is that there's greenhouse gas emissions have to be reduced by 43% from the 2005 levels by 2030 and zero emissions by 2050. This is galactically further than we've ever gotten, because we had a climate change policy in place with a previous Labor government. Then the Liberal government upturned it all and scrapped it because they said it was called a carbon tax, which is something that elitists would say. And then when we got our new government now, their very first promise that Prime Minister Albanese made was direct action on climate change, and he has led the charge. We're actually really fortunate because in the Senate we have that. The real control who they have to negotiate with is the Greens, and of course the Greens are all about climate change, and they're negotiating a few harder things that they want to happen because they're fairly forthright with what they want. But there's no reason to say that legislation won't pass, and then we're on our way to doing something smart and catching up with some of the other more progressive countries in the world. So that's a nice thing, and the fact that they've been able to deliver on an election promise so quickly is really impressive, given that they only sat for the very first time in the last week.
That'd be important for them as well, I suppose, won't it, Rachel, in terms of sort of cementing their authority, I guess, as a new government. And that kind of links us to a story about the coral reef that's been kicking about in the last couple of days. Some news from the coral reef that it's recovered from some of the storms and some of the bleaching effects of record levels, to reach record levels. It's not out of danger by any stretch of the imagination, but I suppose this has to be good news.
Really good news for all the Nemos. Really good news, and good news for people who want to visit, and good news for just the environment in general. I mean, that coral, there are 3,000 separate reefs on that one big reef. It's amazing. Have you been? You should come.
No.
I'll take you.
Yeah.
I'll take you. I'll give you a properly temperatured beer and show you the reef. It's an amazing World Heritage listed natural wonder, and it suffered a lot when our ozone layer depletion began back in the 80s. It suffered a lot with warming ocean temperatures, pollution. I mean, a million things you can think of, but one of the real villains of the reef is these pointy starfish that like to eat it, and when they eat it, they destroy it. So the bleaching is one problem, the starfish are another, but the bleaching is actually as a result of El Nino and El Nino weather events, and we've had a lot of them because climate change is climate change, and we know we're seeing more extraordinary weather events. There were just some really horrendous wildfires in California in the last couple of weeks, and you guys had some ridiculous heat and some fires, and we were watching you and feeling you because we know fire. And it's climate change is what it is, but if we start taking necessary steps, then recovery like this can be an ongoing thing. It doesn't have to be a one-off. I don't call myself a marine scientist by any stretch, but I know common sense would tell me that if we can clean up our environment and clean up our climate and cool everything down a little, then we won't have these amazing weather events that are, sure, they're interesting if you're a meteorologist, but they're infinitely destructive.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take that good news when we get it, Rachel. And you're right. With your point to extreme weather over here, we've now got an extra. I think we've got I think a fortnight without rain on the horizon. I think there'll be. I think it's not quite a fortnight. I think there's going to be a bit wet next Tuesday. Not this coming Tuesday, the Tuesday after, and then again another fortnight of dry temperatures. Hosepipe bans being discussed. Our ground looks scorched. I mean, it's undeniable that we are having an extreme turn of weather this summer, and there'll be plenty more of it as well. All the while, in Birmingham, the Commonwealth Games are in full swing, and Australia, Rachel, doing pretty well by the looks of things.
Well, speaking of rain, it's been raining gold all over. I've got a theory about the pool, though. We took 65 medals in the pool, and the reason why we swim so fast is there are sharks here. So you have to swim like the Dickens. But we have done very well, and I think you guys might be pushing for us to become a republic, so we can't come anymore. But then you hit the top of the table. But honestly, it's been a really long build up because the Tokyo Games were delayed through COVID. These guys have been training harder than they've ever trained in their lives. We're doing really well all over the place, and all the disciplines, and we're really proud of them too. But you guys are making a fair show. What are you, second?
I've got no idea, but I'll take it. Let's just say yes. I assume so.
I'm sure you were second. Last time I checked, you were second.
Oh, okay, I'll take it. What is it? Is it big? Is it sort of being well covered? Is there an enthusiasm for the Commonwealth Games in Australia?
There is, and there isn't. It's hard because of the time difference. We can't actually watch a lot live. We have to catch up with the news the next day. Those of us who have to, keep regular hours, unlike yourself.
Yeah.
But we have to keep regular hours, so we don't get to watch a lot. But it's all over the news, it's all over the papers, it's all over everywhere. And our swimmers are a bunch of legends, and they did very well in Tokyo as well. So we like to follow their happiness. But they're home now, so you can't stay and have a big closing party anymore because of pandemics. You have to get on a plane and leave. So they're here having a party, I think.
Yeah. We are second, by the way. I've just done a quick Google.
Yes, I thought you were.
We're not far behind, really. 150. Well, we're actually quite far behind. 155 Australian medals, 148 England medals. So
that's pretty close.
We'll
that's
take
pretty
it.
close. I mean, if the US were here, you and I would be sitting in the corner crying. But they're not. Exactly.
Yeah, Canada are the next closest on 84 in third. So we're both pretty far out front there, aren't we? Which is good. We'll take it. We'll take that good news while it comes. Can we also talk TV, Rachel? This is the first time that we'll have spoken since the demise of Neighbours. I cried. I wasn't weeping, but I had a tear in my eye, shall we say, when I watched that final scene. It was incredibly emotional. Oh, man, Neighbours.
I know. It's such an institution because, you're a lot younger than me. So I watched it from the very first episode back in 1980, and when it was on a completely different network and then got axed. But it's been a mainstay in Australia. 37 years is a long time. I think the finale was done quite well. I didn't sort of rate the Kylie and Jason appearance particularly. I thought it was a bit strange, and she only said 5 words. She had a bad throat. Was she mute? I don't know what, but apparently it was filmed quite a lot beforehand, and that script hadn't been written. I'm like, you people are actors, athletes, make stuff up. That's what you do. You get to just buff. Yeah. But I did enjoy the Mike and Jane story. Like, Guy Pearce is actually a mate of mine, and there was a connection with Kate Winslet, which not a lot of people know.
Oh, really?
Mike was referring to his ex-wife Rose when talking to Jane about his daughter Sam, and that is a nod to Kate Winslet. He wanted to call his ex-wife Kate, but his actual ex-wife in real life is called Kate, so he opted not to do that. So he called her Rose as a nod to Kate Winslet and her character on Titanic. But Kate Winslet apparently had a poster of Guy Pearce on her wall when she was a younger lady. Isn't that nice?
That is nice, actually. Were you were in Neighbours?
Oh, yeah, about 1,000 years ago, when Harold took over the cafe after poor Daphne passed, he turned it into a vegetarian cafe. And back in the 80s, a vegetarian was like a unicorn. Nobody knew one. Nobody had seen one. So my job was to go in there and ask for a meat pie, which I did. And he said, this is vegetarian. And then my job was to continue going back and asking for a meat pie just to be irritating. And irritating I was. And then cell block H. And then, I did a bunch of that. And then I realised I wasn't very good at that. And then maybe broadcasting might be my thing.
So you were an actress in Neighbours. You had our part in Neighbours. You were meat pie woman in Neighbours.
I was meat pie woman in Neighbours. I was Tracy Taylor in Cell Block H. I was on a bunch of other things, but mostly I did stage and stuff like that. TV really wasn't for me.
How was it then, being in Neighbours?
It was fun. I mean, it's exactly as you think it's going to be, and it's a day here and a day here and a day here, and you sort of rock up and you get in the Air Inspire High with scratchy uniform and just lark around and be silly. And I got to catch up with a guy who I knew, and Annie Jones, who played Jane, who's just the most lovely person. We're from the same hometown, and it was really just a lot of fun. And so Lockledge was the same. It was just a really good time.
Can you deliver your meat pie line for us, Rachel? I don't want to sort of like poke you like a performing bear, but can you do that for us?
I can remember it because it was horrendous. And I also had to do it in my full Australian accent, so prepare yourself. One meat pie, thanks. And then he says, I'm sorry, we only serve vegetarian food. Oh. And then every time I would come back, one meat pie, thanks. Knowing full well, but man doesn't have meat pie. I was a terrorist, pretty much.
Brilliant. That is that kind of top quality storylines that made Neighbours what it was. Rachel, always a joy to talk to you. Thank you. Take care of yourself. We'll do it again soon. Rachel Brunsden in Australia for us, delivering to perfection her meat pie line from Neighbours. Okay, stick about. We'll take you through the Sundays in a sec.